Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Jonatan. It's lovely to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I was someone just sent me a tweet this morning, and in this tweet, there was a White House official claiming that quote, human capital stock is ready to go back to work, end quote. And the person via this email pointing me to this tweet suggested that there were so many things wrong with this tweet. It seems like a pretty good place to begin our conversation today. Not because we'll discuss that particular tweet, but because both of us have had a long-standing interest in total work. So total work, for those who don't know, is I define as the process by which human beings, for a fairly lengthy period of time, have been transformed into workers and nothing else, as more and more aspects of life have come to be work-like. So that quote nicely epitomizes Americans who are not even Americans, not even people anymore. It's just human capital stock, ready to get back to work. Oh man. So I thought it would be lovely to have you on my channel today, because you've lived a very itinerant, nomadic, I would say somewhat bohemian life, in which our present San Francisco-esque or even Danish-esque understanding of being a worker has not been the forefront in your life.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell, let's just begin. So maybe you can tell us what you've been doing today as you come to your mother's house.
Today, yeah.
Yeah, today.
So today shall I start from when I woke up?
You can start however you want to.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just trying to give people a sense that here you are on any given day. You're at your mother's house. Your mother's an old woman. You're living
in my mother's summer house in the northwestern part of Jutland, and I woke up around 6. I was reading a little bit in the bed after waking up.
Yeah.
Then I got up and had a tea and made breakfast for myself and my dad, who was here this morning, and for my mother as well. And then as I briefly told you before, I have this little list that my mother prepared for me visiting, which is things she would like me to do while I'm here.
Yeah.
Or like my help with doing practical stuff with the house. We've been sort of renovating this summer house over the last summer. I helped change the facade and all the windows and everything. And then this summer, about a month ago, we painted the whole house, and now we're trying to finish a lot of detail work. So she's been making a list, and I'm here for a week, and then I have I set that out from around after breakfast up until noon. I'm sort of working on the list, and the list is a lot of small practical things, such as putting on like a handle or doorknob in certain places where it's missing, and finish some paint work other places, and chopping a lot of firewood, and I'm not even sure what it's called, those things you put where the floor and the wall meet in the corners.
Yeah, I don't know what those are either, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But at least they had been missing for the last 8 years since they changed the floor in the living room. So now I put them on this morning, and small things like that. And then I had lunch, and after lunch I've been reading and writing on this. I'm doing some studies at the moment that I'm have some writing, some essays to write that I do.
You're in a master's program, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the master's program in again?
it's an MA in death, religion, and culture. So I would say it's sort of this mix between religious studies, cultural studies, with a focus on death, on how it is, I guess, both understood and practiced in all sorts of different cultures, both contemporary from all over, but also historical traditions and different religious traditions. And yeah, so all about death. Yeah.
So you and I met, let's go back then in time. You and I met actually at a festival, Future Perfect Festival in 2012 in late summer.
Yeah.
In a rural part of Sweden. We won't go too much into the details of the festival. It wasn't much of it. It had nothing to do with the future.
Smile.
It's probably enough to say that this was meant to be, I think, a somewhat utopian picture of what a good future would be like, and it was supposedly anchored in an understanding of sustainability. And it'll take a while to explain, but it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the future, and it certainly wasn't sustainable. I just know I was wet, and I was sleeping in some kind of tent, and I was wet, and I was supposedly one of the speakers there the first day, and it was more like disaster capitalism, I would say.
Yeah.
But anyway, we met there. And then that was the first time I taught at Chaos Pilots, which is a school that you went to back in, I guess that was your last year in 2012. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the beginning of my last year.
Yeah. So what led you, so more context would be helpful. Chaos Pilots is a Danish, somewhat artistic, somewhat social entrepreneurship school based in Aarhus, Denmark. It was founded in 1991 by 3 people. There's a strange founding story, one of whom is called Uffe Elbæk, who's a prominent figure in Danish politics today. The school has been continuously going on since then, and it happens to need guest lectures to fill out the curriculum every year. So that was the first time I taught at Chaos Pilots. And so now I'm wondering, what was it that led you to go to Chaos Pilots?
I think I don't really know that I have a sort of a precise answer. In the years leading, so I started in 2010, and in the years leading up to, I was actually studying to become an engineer.
Yes, yeah, you told me that.
And I, after about a year and a half, I quit for reasons I'm also a little bit unsure. I remember having a feeling that it was actually super interesting. A lot of the things I was really fascinated with the subject and with the doing part of it. All the time spent in the workshops building things really excited me, and so the craft part of it really spoke to me. But there was this particular education seemed very much tailored towards more traditional industry and sort of project management stuff in traditional industry, and it just suddenly didn't really feel like a place I couldn't feel any interest in pursuing that direction. I couldn't see myself going that way, and so I quit and moved to Aarhus, where I started working in a bar. As seemed like a good thing to do.
Are you you're in your early 20s at this point, or a little older than that?
Yeah, I'm around 22.
Okay.
Yeah. And working in a bar is a good place to meet a lot of people in a new place, or in a new city, new town. And long story short, while working here and in those 2 years before I started the Chaos Palace, I met a lot of people who were at the school that that I could that I felt like they were all. They seemed very happy about their school, and I guess I was really interested in trying that. And they also seemed to be speaking about it in a way where they could decide what they want to do while being there. They could develop their own projects, their own ways of talking about what they were doing. They could, they just had an enthusiasm about both about the school, but also about the way you could sort of be at the school in the ways that made sense to you, and that led me to apply, I think. Yeah.
Let's come back just for a moment to the engineering education. I guess my wife was an artist from a young age, and she took naturally to artistry, and then her parents wanted her to do something practical. Reading a story, and so she kind of triangulated desire and was initially in graphic design, I think, and then she moved to industrial design, where she finished a degree, and then because there really aren't any jobs in industrial design, she pivoted to finish a kind of extra education accessories design. What she liked about some of these things is true of what you liked about it, is that she was using her hands skillfully. It was in the craftsman tradition, but there was a bait and switch that evidently you didn't go for. The bait and switch is that she didn't realize that she wasn't actually going to be designing and creating objects after her education was over. Quite the contrary, she would be on computers all the time in order to create spec sheets so that these objects could be created in China in many cases. So, right, something happened as we moved from the education itself, which was very tactile, very craftsman-like, very guild-like perhaps, to the actual industry, which is completely alienated and understood in terms of late capitalism. So what's interesting about your story, and you haven't really told me this part before, is that you actually liked the building part, which we'll probably get around to later on because you've been involved in it since in various capacities.
Yeah.
But somehow you had the intuition that this is all going to go awry for you.
Yeah.
As it turned in this more professional direction.
Yeah. I think it was around a time where that particular link became clear, or like became apparent during the education. And there was also something which I guess it's completely related to it, but I remember the moment, it was actually in the summer house where I'm in now, that I decided to quit. And we had this, it was like a fall break or winter break, I don't remember. And we had some homework. And it was, I was up here on the Sunday about to do this homework that we had to have done by Monday. And I have a feeling that there was part of me that decided to quit instead of doing homework. Like it was also because of this particular homework that just, it just, what's it called? The straw.
Yeah, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you remember what the homework was about then?
I think it was something about, I think it was something with what's it called? It was actually also computer work. We had to do a lot of these like 3D modeling in order to CAD modeling in order to calculate forces in constructions.
Okay.
And I was more interested in building them and seeing what they could hold rather than trying to calculate it on a computer.
It's a striking moment because I can tell you another story that comes out from a different direction. Apparently, the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein was a member of a quite how-to-do Viennese family, and then he moves later on to England, where he later will become pretty prominent philosopher or professor of philosophy. At some point, I don't recall when, maybe his sister asks him to build a house for her. Have you heard this story? No.
No.
Okay. And he's very influenced by a certain form of modernism, and so he has an idea. He really has a blueprint for the house, right? So it's this very modernist approach. Right? He hadn't looked, so far as I can tell, he hadn't looked at the land, the slope of the land, or anything like this. No, he started having the house built according to his specifications, only to see with his own eyes that things weren't quite lining up properly. And to me, this is such a shockingly telling story about this moment of journey, because time was it would have begun with people on the land, building up from the land, probably with some ideas of what they would do. The countervailing example, I think, comes from Ruskin when he's talking about Gothic architecture. And this is kind of a famous example in which apparently all the craftsmen were on site, and they're starting to, they're using their hands, their minds in skillful ways as they begin to kind of re-feng shui the building as it's going up, as opposed to having to deal with a top-down approach. So it's the reason I'm pointing it out here is that this is a kind of an interesting moment as we make the transition from the modest, skillful, attentive use of the hand and the mind in a way that can be picked up and put down, i.e. not total work, to certain versions of total work. So you're more or less, unbeknownst to yourself, rejecting a total work trajectory then and there. So that's why I find the stories interesting. Now let's come to Chaos Pouch just for a moment. So it would take a while to describe the school, but basically you could say it's this. What was left out of the people going to the bar is that these are social misfits who haven't yet found a place in the world and haven't always followed the straight path through life. We'll get around to how I think the school itself twists that toward consulting and such, but generally speaking, it's quite good at attracting a motley crew of interesting, sometimes dreamy people who haven't really found their place in the world. And so that's what was also very attractive to me for that very reason, because I found the school not long after leaving academia in 2009. So it was really quite a nice fit for a time.
Yeah.
So what was it that you found so appealing about the school during your tenure there?
I think there was one of the main things, I guess, is what you're also just mentioning. This group of people that I was there with, which while we were there and afterwards have become some of my closest friends, and some of the people that I have had some of the, I guess, biggest moments in my life together with, and shared a lot of things with, and have in the way that I can feel like much of the people that I have been sharing my life with for the last 10 years is people I've met through that place. So that is, I guess, has been the most significant aspect of it. But I also remember while being there, there was the you could say structurally there were some of the ways it was organized in where it was sort of project based, where you had periods at the school with a lot of sort of high intensity of guest lecturers coming in to be there for 2, 3, 4 days, sort of bringing their thing into the school, whatever that happened to be. And then we were able to sort of have this intense period with a guest lecturer where they would sort of convey a lot of what they have been working on or researching or doing or thinking, and we could sort of tap into it and question it, and it was a really sort of very generative environment for going into and learning about topics, and also I guess it was a place where I think I was also introduced to a lot of other discourses, other ways of living out values than I had sort of grown up with and seen in my life up until then. And so yeah, sort of really feel like that school was an introduction to a lot of other ways of being, other ways of living, other ways of speaking, and other ways of considering what it means to know and be, and yeah. And then besides all these very intense sort of periods at the school, then you had the project works that you were doing either yourself out somewhere with people who are not in and with the school, or as a group of people at the school who were then somewhere, and a lot of autonomy in this, in the sense that you had to in many ways completely develop your own projects and path throughout these 3 years, which is also like both at the school and after the school, you can see the people who have been there, they're doing so many different things in different sort of within different fields of work. A lot of consultants at the moment, as you say, but that's,
we may or may not come back to that.
Yeah. But generally, like, it's just such a wide spectrum of interests that gather here, and I think that was just particularly interesting, that so many different backgrounds from different countries. It's an international school. I don't remember how many different nationalities were in our team, but it was quite significant. Different life stories that you're brought together with, and
all of what you said is true. And there's also just, at times, there's just been this great energy that's hard to put into words. Most of the school is really intangible, and there's this amazing sense of, there have been during certain years, amazing sense of intimacy among the people. So what Americans listening to this probably wouldn't be able to understand is it's a very touchy-feely, it's very ritualistic, very much about certain forms of bonding.
I think it was really the place where, especially in the third year, maybe second and third year, where I at least had this feeling of, through this place I also found other ways of navigating structures, so that being in a certain structure doesn't mean that you are like that you follow the rules. Like, you can make structures with it has this anarchic element, or at least I decided to try and bring that element into this place of sort of carving out sort of an autonomous space within a structure that was in itself intended to be an autonomous space for the people there. So that has stayed with me, I think. And has been sort of expanded that notion even further.
Yes. I want to come shortly to the LungA School, which you're co-founder of, and we'll hear more about that shortly. But first, and I hope this doesn't sound like a caricature, is it possible to characterize a kind of a standard life of a Danish person? I mean, can you do your best to just give us a sense of the contrast between what we've been speaking about so far and what we would expect, what we might have expected your life to have looked like had you followed a fairly standard script?
Yeah. I guess it I would have finished my engineering or any university degree in my early 20s, between early and mid 20s. I would have gotten a job.
You would have moved to Copenhagen. I think that's
I would have
important.
moved
Probably right. We need to make sure there are 8 million people or so in Denmark, and it should be clear that we're seeing a lot of movement from the country to the city. So you finish your degree, probably move to Copenhagen and get a job.
I think depending on industry, Copenhagen, Aarhus seems to be, and probably Copenhagen again a little bit depending on the industry, but but yeah, moved to at least moved to a bigger city. I would have gotten a job. I would definitely have gotten a job, and I would have got a car, and I would have gotten a place to live. I would probably have been.
In time, you would have bought an apartment. That's a very.
I would have bought one because it's a good investment, and you need a place to live, maybe, and I would have probably, at least for the first years, 10, 15, 20 years, stayed either sort of, I would have had a notion of I would have wanted to, I guess, progress somehow in this work. Either
we call it a career.
I would have had a career. I would have. I would probably have had a career. I think I would have had a good career. I think I would be good at careering, actually.
That's the funny part of the story so far, is that people really don't realize that you're fairly steadfast and resourceful and disciplined, so far as I can tell. So it's actually quite amusing to have found you dropping out of school.
We had this at the first year of engineering school. I remember we had this business psychologist that was connected to the school that we spoke to every semester. And she asked me on the first semester, do you think you're going to finish this education? And it seemed like the weirdest question to me. I was like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm going to finish this. I started, therefore I finished. And so actually it was very, I would say, unlike me at the time to not finish it.
But we were speaking about what your life would have looked like. So we have the flat you've purchased. We have a good career.
Yes,
you would have been a careerist. You would have had you were married, but you would have had a wife at some point early on. You would have had children. You probably would have had a second house outside of Copenhagen, some kind of little summer house thing that I hear about. And what's a little bit different about Denmark as opposed to the United States is that I think you would have kept in fairly close contact with family and friends. That to me seems like a pretty standard, and you would have done your duty as a citizen, right? You would have been a dutiful worker and a good citizen. I think that's the interesting part in the social democracy. It's probably not clear outside of Scandinavia or the UK today. There is a strong sense in Scandinavian countries of dutifulness. In part, so to speak, paying back what you've received, because education is free and healthcare is covered by the state and so on. So it's a very interesting form of social contract whereby it really does need to have worker citizens, as it were, to continue to contribute, which is the word I hear often, in ways that benefit society. And that language, contributing in ways that benefit society, is heard more in Canada or in Denmark than it is now in a liberal democratic polity in the United States.
But it has been appealed to the last months in of course in a related to a little bit different thing, but very similar sort of language actually. Of it's called samfundssind, which is sort of this. It's basically just sort of putting your own needs, putting the good of society higher than your own good. And yeah, of course, with the spread of the COVID-19, it's been in relation to how you conduct yourself and keep social distancing and all these things, but very similar language of sort of contributing to the common good.
Yes, but you didn't quite follow that path instead. What was it that led you to Iceland initially?
It was actually, it was in the summer just before I started Chaos Pilots. Okay. I received an invitation to go there to attend a small arts and music festival in the summer of 2010. And at first I actually, I think I said, or I thought that I'm not gonna go. I can't go. I have work at this bar, and I wanted to just earn a little bit of money before starting the school. But I don't know exactly why, because I was also tired of working there. So at some point, this impulse of like, nah, it's not worth it. Let's just go to Iceland. So yeah, so I went to Iceland instead, and it was actually because there had been some cancellations, because it was the invitation came from a woman named Björn, who was already attending the Chaos Pilots the year before me, and she had invited people from her own team at the school and current students to go, but not enough said yes. So she decided to invite a few of the ones who were about to start, myself included. So we were in total a group of 10 who went there in 2010 for a week to attend this small festival in a tiny village with 650 people on the east coast of Iceland. And so that was what brought me there. And in many ways, the hook already was sort of planted on that first trip.
What was the hook? So you prepped me for the next question. I see what's going on here.
I'm unsure.
What was it hooked you? Yeah,
I'm unsure if I hooked the place or if it hooked me.
Yeah.
But at least there was and I don't think I really noticed it. It was just a great trip. And then the year after, we decided to go again. And I mean, the first year, I remember it was a very, very spectacular experience for many reasons. Being in Iceland was fairly spectacular. The surroundings, the midnight sun, like this. It was sort of this week where it was just light all the time, which can also, I think there was a certain madness involved in the whole experience, and but also this sense of this small place just allowing us to do whatever we felt like, and not just allowing it, but helping it happen. So we were all spread out in different workshops this week, working with artists from all over who were developing these workshop formats that we then participated in. And it seemed like whatever idea we just came up with, someone in town were like, yeah, sure, let's just do it. We can help you. I got these 4 kilometers of rope over here and a crane here and an empty barn here, and you can just do what you want. And so that attitude I wasn't used to that attitude, used to meeting that attitude. So it was very refreshing and very sort of, you can breathe here, that kind of thing. And that, that was the hook, I guess. And so we went the year after, and I got a lot of conversations happened, and suddenly that summer we were 4 friends who had bought a house in this town big old house that had been empty for 3 years. The former owner, I think, had gone bankrupt and left 3 years earlier during the in 2008.
Yeah.
And so this house was owned by the bank, and we were able to buy it really cheap. And it was also falling apart a little bit. So, but we loved it. This was our place, and our playground, and our chance to. I think from the beginning we talked about it in the way that we really like all these things that we wanna, or like, you know, going to the case palace, a lot of ideas, a lot of things we wanted to bring into the world, but not a lot of homes for all these things. A lot of places they could exist. We were like, this is the place where all the stuff that can't exist anywhere else is allowed to exist. And I think that has been, I guess, in many ways still is sort of a central aspect of what we've been wanting to facilitate and make up there, and it's also part of the motivation. But yeah, we got the house in 2011, and then just after we met, a few months after, I moved there to live in this house, but also to start. I joined this woman Björn in this idea that we had been somewhat on the sideline of starting up an art school, also in this town, sort of as you could say as an offspring of the festival, a sibling to the festival. And so I moved there in 2012, and a lot of things happened, school and renovating this house in 2013, the one that we had bought. And I don't think at any point back then I thought that I was moving to Iceland. I was just going there because, you know, there were some projects that I was involved with. But 8 years.
But then you ultimately moved there, and you did start an art praxis school.
Yeah.
Can you give us, it's going to be hard to describe this as well, but can you give us some sense of what that school is about?
So yes, I can try. So I think recently I described it as 12 weeks of more or less coordinated moments of what's it called, harmony and dissonance. But that doesn't really say a lot, so I'll try and maybe put it in other words. So it's an art school, and we have room for about 16 to 20 participants in each program. We have 2 programs every year, one in the fall, one in the spring. And each program is 84 days. And during those 84 days, we have a lot of guest artists coming that are inviting all the participants into their praxis, whether that's a particular medium, whether they are visual artists, sound artists, more performative or conceptual practices, or whether they are philosophers or have another sort of particular discipline of practice that they bring in. But it can also be invitations into a particular topic that they are working with or researching or somehow treating with their practice. And it's a mix of weeks where we have these guests coming in to invite participants into what they are doing and into their work and practice. And then we have other weeks which is more dedicated to for all the participants to develop their own their own things and their own
Mm-hmm.
projects and practices. It's a very open school format in the sense that there's no accreditation, there's no examination, it's not good for your CV. It's not bad for your CV either, but it doesn't give you any sort of formal qualifications, you could say. And of course, it's a school that's also rooted in a school tradition that exists in Scandinavia, called folk high schools, that originated in Denmark 175 years ago, which is this sort of informal learning situations and focus on sort of a more, you could say, more holistic educational program of democratic education of the whole human, of being active participants in a democratic society, what that means at a given point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. It might be hard to describe. So we have the beginning of this alternative path you follow, but it might be a little bit hard to describe the rhythms of your life. That's part, because there might be a mistake made at this point. The mistake would be to think that you're something like a hard-nosed social entrepreneur who is always at it, according to some Jack Ma formula, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, or something like that, or 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, or whatever his formula is. But that's not really an accurate portrayal of a rhythm of the day, nor is it a very accurate, because you've done so many different things, ranging from using your hands to being a facilitator. And so can you give us some kind of taste or more felt understanding of what the rhythm of your life there has been like?
Yeah, I think it's the thing about the rhythm of the day is a little bit tricky because it differs so much depending on what time of year. So something about the rhythm of the year might be a little helpful. So the school is running, so we have 2 programs of 12 weeks, so that's 24 weeks. We have some physical preparation of the facilities, of the spaces, before, between, after. So all in all, 6.5 months or so where the school is going. But that also means that we have almost half a year every year where the school is not going on. So for the last, I would say, for the last 5 years especially, there has been sort of, my year has been split into these 2 different parts. One was where a complete immersion into the school, which when it's going on feels like a 24-hour thing, but it also doesn't feel like work at all. That's maybe for another conversation. At least I've been available, present, participant all the time in these, while the school is going on. At least that's the commitment that from our side is to be there with whatever there is and whatever happens. And then for the rest of the year, I could do whatever I want, be wherever it makes sense. And it has, for the last 5-6 years, it's been this mix of many summers we've been in Iceland because we've been renovating different houses, both the house that we bought, that we renovated in 2013, the house that we now live in, renovated in 2016, and then in 2018 and 2019 we renovated this giant factory that someone gave us, like 1,000 square meter factory that was given to the school, that we renovated and turned into studio spaces. So the summers has been very, very different rhythm than the school going on, but sometimes a lot of these construction building projects, and other summers more traveling, being in Denmark a lot, also to see family, and between 2012 and 2017 also to see Nana, my wife, who for these 5 years we lived in separate countries, and yeah, so whenever I could, I also went to Denmark to be with her. But at least this division of the year into two quite significantly different parts I've felt that a lot. I think it's maybe another aspect that it makes sense to say is that that I haven't, for the last 9 years, I haven't paid any rent. So I think that has been it quite quickly in Seyðisfjörður.
So that's the small Iceland town.
That's the small town. In the beginning, we didn't have any money at all, so we were lucky that we had bought this house very cheap, and meant that we could live there. We didn't. It was fairly, and we got, in Denmark you get money to go to school, so that was enough to sort of sustain our lives at that point, almost enough at least. But I very quickly had this feeling that trying to figure out ways of living where I didn't need money, that would allow me, like all the other stuff I had already tried too many times, to try and make enough of something so that I could do something else, but you just I never ended up doing those other things. So it just but by trying to sort of relieve myself of needing money, that suddenly freed up the time and the energy and everything to get involved.
And what are the different ways in which you've done so? So we know that you had a house that was purchased.
First we had
mortgage.
A house. Yeah. And then now for the last 4 years we made a deal with a very good friend in town who had this big shed next to his house that was also just a shed. There was nothing there. There was some walls, and then he'd said that he came to us one day and he said that we looked tired, and I think he was partly concerned and partly interested in getting something from us, which is I think is a great combination. So he asked us. He said that if we wanted to, we could make a deal that was, he had this building that wasn't worth anything, couldn't be used for anything, but he wanted to make a house there. He didn't have the time to build it himself. He didn't have the money to hire anyone. So he asked if we wanted to build it for free. He would pay for all the materials, we would build it, and then we could live there for free for 7 years. And that was exactly what we wanted. So when I say we, at this point, it was myself and Lasse, who I've been running the school with for the last 6 years. We were both living in this other house that we had bought. He was part of buying it as well. And we were also running it as an artist residency at the time. So we were sort of at the school most of the day, and then in the residency where we also had guests. And I think that was one of the reasons why our good friend said that we looked tired. And then in 2016 we renovated this, we built a house where this shed was, and that's where we live now. So we still have another 3 years of no rent there. But also when I lived at the Chaos, when I lived at the Chaos Pilots, because I think for, I don't know, half a year or something, we were a group of people who were just living at the school, which was also part of.
Oh, I didn't know that. You're living at the school. Okay.
Yeah, in this, I mean, now they're in a different place, but I don't know if you remember the building that you had your meeting upstairs, those small dirty rooms.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we had this sort of unspoken agreement with the people working there.
Like a Dharma bomb. That's nice.
Yeah, so we lived there, and then every morning rolled our things together, stashed it in a corner, and we just made sure to keep the space nice. And then they allowed, or they sort of allowed it. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, you have to move out," and then we're like, "Yeah, we'll do it soon," and that kind of thing.
Oh,
But
wow,
so
that's a great case. That's
and
what
before that,
Michel Foucault calls illegality, which means it's technically it's illegal, but
yeah,
the people will continue to overlook it.
yeah. And before that, I was living on a boat for a few months, also for free, where I had an agreement that with the guy who owned it, that if I sewed pillows for his boat, I could live there for free. So I learned how to sew in that period. But but it was just just this feeling that suddenly, like, oh, there's so many ways where you can live for free. I remember being feeling very liberated when realizing that.
Wow, so you haven't paid rent. Have you ever? You haven't paid rent in a long time. Isn't that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and viewers might not know that you are receiving some tuition fees from the students coming in, and I'm sure there's some other things too. And I think you were able to establish an agreement with the state of Iceland to receive some funding, some funding as well.
Yeah, more and more. I would say more and more stable financial structure for the school. First years not so stable, but in the last 4 years, I think especially, it's been pretty well funded.
So we come now to the current period of your life. I think you and your wife, tell me once again, you and your wife have some idea about having a farm in Denmark. At least that's what I heard last. So your relationship with the LungA School, this art praxis school in Iceland, is still there, but it's winding down.
With that, then maybe it's worth mentioning that we have been pretty much for the last 5 years just been 2 people at the school, Lasse and myself, and we had sort of from the beginning wanted to, when there was a more stable situation, we wanted to be some more people involved, so it wouldn't just be the 2 of us, but more of this loosely coupled structure that would help itself and each other to hold and facilitate the school when it was happening. And that has been, it's more that we're trying that now. So we are some more people, meaning that in the future, at least in the coming next few years, I'll just have to be in Iceland 3-4 months a year to run one program, and then the idea is that the rest of the year is also a chance to be in other places, be involved with other things, either dive into your own practice, whatever that is, or be together with other people and into more communal things, and or whatever, but at least other things that you can bring up to the school and sort of bring stuff into the school, but also so that the school has a chance to be brought into other things and create these nice threads between things. And what we are now, we're looking at houses in Denmark.
We, namely your wife and you,
and Nana and I, and some friends. We know a few things. One is that we want to live with other people in some sort of a collective commune sharing situation. We don't want to live in a city. We want to be able to grow things, our food and other plants. And I think that's probably some of the basic things that has been sort of guiding us. And now we've been looking at a place, same place. I've been there twice. I'm going there again tomorrow. It's
That's promising.
It's very, very exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that how many things you've learned over the years when it comes to things I know very little about, but I'm sure plumbing, or maybe you have, well, you were just coming from kind of a, what in the United States we call kind of a woofer situation, where you were on a farm for almost a month learning permaculture approaches to farming.
Yeah.
And your wife Nana grew up with her own garden at home. I imagine, I'm sure she's learned other things as well. So you have this kind of, as you know, a little bit of agriculture. You've got some kind of a little bit of a lot of things, right? You got some understanding of building and carpentry, understanding of resourcefulness, and so forth. So imagine this farm you're going to potentially buy might be a need to be a fixer-upper. Is that?
Yeah. Preferably.
Preferably, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is the one. Not too much, but it has. I think there's a balance. It's not. I think it has also been a lot of building the last years. Just big construction projects that we've taken on that we had no way of actually knowing if we could pull them off. Just had a sense that it could be done. But I think we're not looking for something that is a complete ruin. That would have to be
sure.
But something that you can do a lot with. Something that isn't completely broken, but that still needs a lot of care and a lot of attention and a chance to make interesting solutions and surprising solutions. I think that's also always very fun.
Right. So now I have a portrait, maybe the last 10 or so years of your life. I think it would be a good thing to turn to maybe something a little more theoretical or conceptual. So given that we have all this data of sorts, what would you say that your basic view of work or working is vis-a-vis the life that you wish to lead? Or if that's a little bit too vague, it could be something like, how do you imagine yourself working during this period of your life? What place does it play in that life?
I think I think there is I think earning a little bit of money plays a part in the sense that that when you there's going to be expenses when you have a house, and probably can't necessarily.
I have a house, and I know that.
Probably can't grow all the food. Would say this last month I've really been introduced to the possibilities of dumpster diving. I'm going to continue that, but still earning a little bit of money is going to play a part in my life. Like for now, it's through the school in Iceland, and maybe in the future it will be somewhere else. I can feel I have a very sort of loose relationship to it, in the sense that it doesn't need to be all that interesting if it can't at any given point.
Sure.
The people that we are moving in with now, I know, they just got home from Italy, moving home to Denmark from Italy, and I think his name is Jacob, one of them, and he's looking at just getting a work at a gas station where you work evenings, because that allows him to also be home during the day with his two kids, and so I feel very much like I'm pretty sure I can find a job if I need one, sort of find ways of earning money. So that's going to play a role in different forms. Then I imagine that when we buy a house, especially if it's a big place in the countryside, there's always maintenance. and there's always things that needs fixing, and I think that's gonna be a big part of my life always, to to make things a little bit nicer all the time, sort of dedicate a little bit attention to something. And I really like when use of a thing makes it nicer all the time instead of wearing it. So I think that kind of attention and care of a space is going to be, and of course that's labor, it's work, it's a physical activity, and it's all sorts of kinds of activities. Then what else? What was the question even?
Good question. Yeah, I was just asking, what role do you think work will play in this part of your life?
Yeah.
So you've given me two different things. One has to do more with the earning a living piece. The other one has to do more with the upkeep.
Yeah. Then I think there's probably an aspect that has more to do with what we're also, what the school has been about, what the residency is like, what a lot of my life has been about for the last 10 years is also about this notion of carving out spaces for interesting things to happen. It's a very vague way of saying it, but for experimental artistic practices to happen, for experimental conversations to happen, for sort of this element of carving out spaces for myself and others, inviting into those spaces. I think that is also going to be a big part of my life.
I wouldn't necessarily call that work, but now we're getting into the niceties. No. But that to me is to me something really happened in modernity as we pivoted and started to make. It's hard to even use the word in English because it's artwork, but like these are artistic creations that have quote unquote no business. I think in the purity of being called work. Even if later on they become a different ontologically, they take on a different status as something like a commodity to be bought and sold. The original spirit of it is the spirit of leisure and of the gift. Maybe it would be helpful to see the edifice, a bit more of the, so to speak, the edifice that your life you think is resting on. So you have what hasn't been clear so far is the extent to which you're quite an aesthetic person. But what do you think are the fundamental concerns or cares that you and your wife have or will have? For example, if someone were to ask me, I have kind of a fairly some pretty abstract answers. So I'm a Buddhist, so one is enlightenment, path of enlightenment. I'm a philosopher, so there's wisdom. That I purportedly care about all sentient beings. So another one is love. So I'm just wondering, what is that? What is that envelope of sorts? What is the basic orientation of the life?
I think I would say that I would say that love plays a really important part there for in many that's also very in many sort of but like this, of course, with different kinds of love, the one that I have and share with Nana, but also with friends, with family, with generally this with others, which also takes the form of attention and care and all these things. But that's a very important aspect. Then I think there's something about the feeling of sort of being in it in a way. There's I don't have you seen the movie Wings of Desire?
Maybe.
It's
if you ask me the movie question, I'll probably the answer is almost always no.
But it's very briefly. It's a German movie. It's sure. by Wim Wenders, and the narrative sort of, which is it's about you follow sort of two angels, one in particular, who in Berlin they are angels, but they are able to hear people's thoughts and what goes on in people's minds, and they since before creation they've been around, and they have been witnesses to everything, but they are one of them. Sort of the movie is about him also. He wants to be part of it, and not just observe everything and be able to tell everything, but wants to be part of everything. And I think all these things, there's these few scenes where he's describing this desire to be in life, be alive in life, as a human. And I think that I really like this movie, but that's also part of, probably because I can recognize a lot of that desire, I guess, or that wanting to be in something. And that's like, I think that's also why I like building stuff, because you touch so many things and you are around so many different materials, and you have so many smells and sort of stimulation of all your senses, of you feel your own body being, so like all these aspects of being in it in various ways feels quite essential for me. And I would say then I would say also that I think there's for me, and maybe call it like an ethical dimension of paying attention to the way that we are, if we are in it, the ways that we are then in it, meaning also paying attention to the context that we're in, the consequences of our being in those contexts through the ways that we are there, and generally just trying to be, I guess, be conscious of being a sort of I'm not sure how to put it, like having some form of a contributing presence to something. But I also know that whenever you exist, you are sort of probably contributing to something to exist and not other things. So there's always, it's not about everything thriving, but at least being very conscious about what it is that you help thrive and live, and perhaps what it is that you don't, and then try to then be as clear as it is possible about about those decisions, and about, it needs better wordings, but at least trying to figure out how to be a contributing existence, and just not be an asshole.
What was the last part in reference to? besides
it was just me giving up trying to find a way. So,
I see.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So do you think about your life? There would be various kinds of work of the sorts you described, and there would be there'd be the justification for it all. It had to do with love, being in it, and some ethical dimension that you're trying to describe.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes a certain amount of sense, especially not being an asshole. Well, I think what might need to be kind of just fleshed out or underscored here is some very simple things that might otherwise go neglected or unmentioned or passed by. So just mention a few things that come to mind for me. One is that when I ask you questions about work, you provide very uninteresting, unspecial answers. I think that's important. It's a proper attitude to take toward work, right? We forget that at our peril. So that has to be underscored. And the other thing is, there's a certain kind of resourcefulness you have. It's not it's not that big of a thing how it's the case that I work in this way or that way. There could be other ways. And the third thing that springs up is that there's not some kind of single thing. And I remember having conversations with you in the past, and you never said I'm a builder. You never said I'm a facilitator, or I'm just a founder of a school. And let's maybe set that one to the side because it might be a little different case. Maybe that's not quite work. But it's always been these are the sorts of things that I'm doing, engaged in, and perhaps even find my attention on and my care in. But there's more to be said, and I'm certainly welcome to hear what you have to say. But that the fact that work is just a fine thing. So I like to say something like as follows: you're able to pick something up. It's not special. You pick it up, you engage with it one-pointedly, and you put it down. It's fine. That's just as lovely as carpentry is just as lovely as making love, or it's just as lovely, probably more lovely to make love, but or just as lovely as walking in a field or whatever. So it's a defetishized. It's very important to get that sense of there not being this particular, the first and the third point come together. That there's not something that's fetishizable, and it's not a single thing that's been cordoned off.
Yeah.
And if one is more resourceful, then one is kind of more able to live in the age that we're now living in, which is an age where there is a lot more volatility, as people describe it. So I'm wondering, as you're hearing me speak about, and I'm trying to make it sound almost boring. That's my joke. I mean, if you really are in right relation with work, it's almost boring. It's interesting, but it's almost boring. It's almost not worth talking about. You really wouldn't. I mean, it's almost, I find it almost gauche or impolite to be having this conversation. Someone asked me recently on Twitter, and I won't name names, just what would be the future of work? And I thought, that's not even an interesting question to ask, really.
Yeah.
Once you understand the critique of total work, you think, well, why would I actually devote myself to asking that question? If you're in right relation with work, there is no such question to ask. Like I joked on a podcast recently, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, which is a famous Zen saying. Just chopping wood, carrying water. When you chop wood, you carry water. When you're not chopping wood and you're not carrying water, you don't really think about the whole darn thing.
Yeah.
It's fine. I was just wondering whether you had any reflections based on my.
I think the point about about it not being fetishized or special has been. I really feel like there's a certain that I have a certain gratitude towards Seyðisfjörður and the people there
Mm-hmm.
regarding this, because in many ways there's like I think I mentioned this to you in at some point another conversation where when I started being in Seyðisfjörður in Iceland, somehow I was relieved of all pressures of having to do something interesting with my life, because being in Iceland was apparently interesting enough. So there was when I spoke to someone in Denmark, like, oh, what are you doing? I'm in Iceland. Great. I mean, I didn't have to do anything else. So there was a certain.
You weren't doing some kind of IDEO design facilitation for Lego last week.
It was definitely a get out of jail card to be there, which I feel like has much more than I probably sort of gave thought, but it has meant that that I haven't, because of being there, I haven't felt a need to, and I haven't felt the pressure to figure out what I am. I haven't felt the need to develop sort of, to identify myself with a particular thing I'm doing.
Yes, and let me just add here, I want to hear more about what you're saying, but let me just add, it's usually at this point when I'm having a philosophical conversation with someone who's been deeply steeped in flow work, who both receives the questions and asks the questions, so what's next? And there's such an anxiety associated with what's next. Like, well, doesn't really matter. Doesn't really ultimately matter. Figure out why you're here. But you can see that that question, though, you probably don't get that much, but that question of what's next, even as you change your relationship with LungA School, you might not be getting that kind of anxious or anxiety-ridden question from people in a way that they certainly would have if someone were to shift careers or pivot in one's career.
Yeah, I definitely felt like some people around me are more nervous on my behalf than I am.
Yes.
But I think it was also, there was this I think it also had to do with one thing, of course, like when speaking to someone not in Iceland, while being there, sort of, it was you didn't have, that was enough, but there was also this aspect of most people in town, I think, at least a lot of people there, I mean, their relationship, like this notion of work being so central, the notion of total work is like
almost incomprehensible in terms of the way they live.
It's definitely, like, I wouldn't say that it's not present there. Of course, it's sort of it's I agree that it is rooted quite deeply culturally also in Iceland there, but at the same time, it just it doesn't look in the same way, at least, or it doesn't penetrate all aspects of life there in the same way. And most people had lots of different jobs, also because in a small town like that, you're not necessarily one thing, unless you're like the chief of police or the but so many people were like, yeah, then I'm doing this and this and this, but in the summer it's tourists, and then in the winter it's this, and so this is
well before remote work and the kind of digital class really begins to spring up, as it has during COVID-19. So people are just cobbling things together.
Yeah, you kind of have to. And it was just very liberating attitude towards what you're doing. It was people are, if there's something, then they are their names, and that was great. Sometimes you don't even know what they're doing at any given.
Right. Yeah. And that's the interesting bit about having conversations with people who are elsewhere. It's a sweet moments. I guess this happened frequently for you, and one wouldn't even think to ask that question. That's what I mean when I say it's almost impolite they're having this conversation. Why would we be talking about this of all the things we could talk about?
Yeah.
Maybe someone, I don't know, what sorts of things did people talk about? I assume there was forms of chatting and gossiping and all sorts of what's going on in the town, whether the library is opening up.
A lot of gossiping. Yeah. But I think also it's just because the notion of what, like, sometimes it feels like there's this weird sense that everyone has a paycheck coming from somewhere somehow. They just do a lot of other things also. So it's also doesn't mean that they're not necessarily talking about work. It might be, then I was helping out here with this and this, and like all these different conversations mixed in together. But it's not about where you get your money, or like it's not about what you spend your money. Like it's
sure. Nobody was singing the praises of investment banking, so far as you could tell. No, it's all. Yeah, they've also had the challenges with that. At some point. Well, yeah, the collapse of 2008, 2009 certainly hit in Iceland as well. Yeah. So I don't know. As you think back on our conversation today, are there any reflections or things that you'd like to share? I would like to share that I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it very much too. Yeah. In many ways, it's I was nervous when we started. I'm not so. As I also wrote you, I find it I find it a little bit uninteresting to talk about. What I do sometimes. Well, that's why I want you on to speak with you. We need someone for whom it's very uninteresting, so that at some point perhaps it can be put in its place, and we don't even really talk about it, except in passing. So I think, but I have a feel like this. I think it was. Or a reflection, not necessarily on the conversation, but it was more this feeling that this all these very uninteresting elements of what was it? I had to also write an article recently about the school, and where I was also trying to speak to this element of maintenance and uninteresting daily life, and there was I think what I'm trying to speak to is this notion that to not necessarily consider the everyday as a vehicle for manifesting some kind of grand project, or but sort of letting the everyday be enough in itself in many ways. And that is so it has a very so it's not an epic. It's not an epic. It's just pretty, but it's special. It can be special. Yes, it's very lovely and special. Beautiful, yeah. And it has. It's all those things that this angel in this movie is talking about that he would like to experience. It's very mundane, small things, wiggling your toes, and drinking warm coffee, and all these very. Well, it's beauty. It's a genuine. It's kind of the aesthetics of everyday life. It's almost titled by Michel Deserto or some such, but it's the aesthetics of everyday life. But there's actually something really quite beautiful, the unremarkable. Once one understands this is kind of the essence of Zen too, is that the most unremarkable is sweet, but never with a capital S. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this conversation today, my friend. Same to you. Thank you again for the invitation. You're welcome.